Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm your ever-present host, Andy Bernstein. As many of you know, I've been working for the NBA for over 40 years. Throughout that time, I've had the privilege and opportunity to meet some incredible people, athletes, coaches, management, trainers, fellow photographers, and journalists. Same holds true for the 6 years I have been doing this podcast. There are some people you meet that just stand out more than others. I'm sure you can relate to that from your jobs or personal experience. Jackie MacMullan is one of those kinds of people for me. When I first met Jackie in the early 80s, she was one of the very few women on the NBA beat. She covered the Celtics, and although I was supposed to be impartial, I was, of course, a huge Lakers fan living in LA. But I never held that against Jackie. Quite the opposite. The quality of her writing and the work ethic I saw every time our paths crossed were attributes I greatly admired. She was a real pro. I think that's the best thing you can say about anyone in our business. Jackie went on to write for Sports Illustrated and ESPN, went in front of the camera, and became a well-known face to sports fans throughout the country. She also had a stint as a fellow podcaster. Who knew? She always knew her stuff, could back it up, and never back down. Jackie was instrumental in one of the greatest achievements of my career, and I'll always be grateful for her advocating for me to win the Hall of Fame's Curt Gowdy Award in 2018. Now we're both Hall of Famers. Jackie has won too many awards to mention here. She's a trailblazer to young journalists, male and female. Now retired, it took some relentless pursuit to get Jackie to do this interview, so I can't be more grateful to her for speaking with me on this episode so we could bring her story to all of you. A great person, a role model, and someone I have always admired. Enjoy this conversation with the legendary Jackie MacMullan. And as always, I'll see you on the backside. Well, I want to welcome my friend, fellow journalist. She's known for everything from print, TV, online, a fellow podcaster, a fellow Basketball Hall of Fame Curt Gowdy winner.
Love that.
Yeah. How you doing, Jackie MacMullan? So great to see you.
Great, Andy. Yeah, it's nice to see you. I haven't seen you in person since I retired, so it's good to see your smiling face, even though our listeners will not see it.
Well, yes, it's great to see you too. However, I got to find out what this retirement thing is all about. Okay, so what's going on? Are you like completely retired?
I have been for a little while. I left ESPN almost 2 years ago, but I was in the middle of a project with The Ringer with, Bill Simmons.
Yes.
The evolution of the NBA icon, which turned out to be a massive, massive project. I didn't expect that one. I had never done a podcast series before. So
yeah,
I was my own worst enemy. I dove down that rabbit hole and didn't come up for a year and a half. So that was the last official thing I did. Well, actually, that's not true. Do you know that I wrote a story for The Ringer on Ime Udoka before the playoffs last year? That was my last official story. There you go. And then I've been very happily, I've very happily stepped back. I haven't written a word since I stopped, which I keep expecting to wake up one morning and, all the great writers, all the geniuses, all the legends, you hear about them getting up every morning and writing. And apparently I'm none of the above, because right at the moment, anyway, I don't have any inkling to do that. I imagine I will at some point, but well,
I hear you. I'm easing my way off the court. I'm working like half the games, only home games now, no real traveling at all. So I'm with you. This is year 42 for me. So, time to and we're building this Legend of Sport thing. So what's that?
I think that's about when I stopped, after just about 40 years, 41 years. So, first at the Globe and then later Sports Illustrated, then back to the Globe. And then, finally ESPN was a great place to finish, because I really did get a chance to explore all the mediums, radio, TV, and the written word. I mean, I always said so many people, especially young people who watched Around the Horn or PTI or, the formerly The Jump, which is now the NBA. I don't even know what they call it now, but, they're going to remember me for that. But I hope most people remember me as a writer, because that's the way I.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. Kobe very famously said that he knew it was time to retire when he woke up in the morning and didn't want to go to the gym and shoot anymore. Right. November, 2015. I remember him saying that. Did that happen for you? Because for me, it hasn't quite happened yet, but I'm very close to like hanging the camera up.
Right. I think that, for me, Andy, COVID hit, and, I make my living, or I did make my living having people tell me things they don't tell anybody else.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I wasn't allowed to sit in the room with them.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to connect in the same way with someone over Zoom or over the telephone. And so I felt a little hamstrung by what I was doing. And I think too, I got to the point where I'm looking around and thinking, well, what is it that I haven't done yet that I'm just really dying to do? Like what, I mean, I'd been on TV, I'd written books, so that podcast was kind of interesting to me. But then beyond that, I felt like for the first time, and the only time really, the stories started to feel the same. And that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. And I really loved what I did, but I got to the point where I thought, you know what, when I started in this business, I was 21. I was younger than most of the athletes I was covering, because back then the league wasn't flooded with 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds like it is now. There were some for sure, but I was younger than most of the players. And then I was their age, and then it got to be, well, maybe I could be their mother. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, I'm their damn grandmother now. It's time to go. So I walked away at the wrong time. I finally kind of made it to the point where I was making the kind of money I had always hoped a journalist could make. But the money wasn't a good reason to stay. And if that was the reason I was going to stay, then I was going to be shortchanging ESPN. So, I called my agent, I talked to my family, and my husband always says the same thing: do whatever you want to do. I also had quit twice during my career. I took time off 2 different times. Once when my son was about 4, because I just felt like he needed me around a little bit more than maybe my daughter had, who was older. And then when they were in high school and in college, they were involved in so many activities and sports and theater. And I thought, I'm just never going to get to everything. So I left, I quit, and I took 2 years off, and it was just fantastic, So I was very fortunate to be able to do that, and then to, find a place to land after that 2-year hiatus. So it was, the toughest part of our profession was trying to be a mom and to be a journalist, and not to compromise either one. And it's impossible to do that. And there were so few role models for me. There were women in the industry, but not a lot of them that I came across had families, had young children that were trying to balance that. So you just tried to do the best you could,
Yeah, look, you appreciate the choir. I can't tell you how many ballet recitals and things. I was a single dad. My kids were little, they were 3 and 4 till probably around 9, 10, and it was a juggling act. Like I couldn't believe, I was flying with the Lakers, come home 2, 3 in the morning, wake up, have to go, get them, take them to school. I mean, I loved all that. It's just, I don't know, couldn't do that today, but we do what we have to do. Jackie, let me ask things have changed so much with access to athletes, right? I mean, you and I go back to where, we traveled with the teams, or, we just hung out with them. There weren't all these layers that you had to get through.
Practice was open, Andy. I can remember when practice was open.
That's
like we
right.
went. That's how everyone always said to me, well, how'd you get to know Larry Bird? And I'm like, well, I did what he did. I just showed up 2 hours early. So I got practice. If practice at 10, I got there at 8:30. Just sat in the bleachers and watched them warm up. And, after a while, they'd say, well, who are you? What are you doing here? And, conversations would start. And so that was such a great advantage. But, that didn't last too long. I think I only had 5 or 6 years of that. And then, practice got closed and it was open for the last hour. And then all of a sudden it's open for, 10 minutes. You don't see anything.
And then they let one guy be available, and that's
it. And, you'd go into the locker room before games. I always did my best work pregame, talking to guys. You knew you had to know what their workout, their pregame schedule was. And then you like Ray Allen. I always knew when Ray Allen was done, when he played for the Celtics. He was earlier than everybody. So he got there and he would do his workout. He'd have his chicken. He'd shave his head at the exact same time. He was a creature of habit. So by the time pregame access was open, he was all done. He was relaxed. He was a great interview pregame. Whereas Kevin Garnett, you couldn't go near that dude. If you did it, he'd bite your head off. So you got to know the cadences of the players you covered. And, I don't think any players are available pregame now. I don't know, because I haven't had to do it for a while, but I don't think it's even exists anymore. And I think that's too bad, because that was a great way to, I did a mental health series for ESPN, a 5-part mental health series. And most of not the interviews, but the connections I made, Andy, were all pregame. On the court, pregame, talking with opposing coaches, assistant coaches, opposing players, just sitting courtside, not interviewing them, just having a conversation with them, laying the groundwork for this story that I would probably argue was the most important thing I ever did, And
it was
I don't even know how feasible that is today. I don't know. I'm not there anymore, but.
Well, I'm wondering if that influenced your decision in any way, that it's just frustrating now because you can't get close to these players anymore. Right.
And yeah, it did a little bit. I think the one thing that had him going on in my favor was I had been around so long. Yeah. I had a little bit of cachet. I had a lot of their numbers. The agents knew me and either liked me or didn't, had already made up their mind. For instance, that evolution of the NBA icon, that podcast series, we just got going. And I was like, man, we need Steph Curry. We got to get Steph Curry. And they're like, we're not going to get Steph Curry. I'm like, yeah, we are. We're going to get Steph. And so you could, I knew who to go to get those people. And in some cases, I could go directly to the players. And so that, I think I was fortunate, because I'd been around so darn long that, people would respond to you. But I've said it 1,000 times, the young guys breaking in today and women breaking in today, they have a tall order in front of them. It's, but I don't think it's impossible, because I see great young people do it. One of my favorites is Logan Murdoch, who works for The Ringer and who I've gotten to know a little bit. And man, that guy, he works at it, and he's developed relationships, and he's a pretty young guy, and he does a fantastic job. So I don't want to hear it's impossible, because I'm watching very talented young people do it.
Yeah, it's just a little harder. Plus, obviously with social media, the athletes have kind of turned the tables a little bit, because they kind of control their narrative, right?
But they don't. I'll push back on that. Okay. And I tell them, I say this all the time to them. I've had these discussions before with some of the best and biggest NBA athletes out there. And they're like, well, I'm going to tell my own story. I said, well, you can go right ahead and do that, but you're not going to tell it well. That's not what you do well. And you think that by whitewashing your story that people are interested. They're not. Okay. They want to see warts and all. And the most compelling and interesting stories are stories that show humanness. And so I would argue most of them, the exception is LeBron. LeBron has done a phenomenal job of crafting his image and controlling his own destiny. His company is fantastic. It's first rate. It's well done. And I think everybody else has tried to copy him. And in my opinion, no one has succeeded. So I do say, I've said to some of the athletes, I remember having a conversation with Trey Young about it a little bit. And I said, listen, you're a complicated guy. Some people are going to love you, some people aren't, but that's what makes you so interesting. That makes you compelling. People want to get to know you. They don't want to think you're someone way up in the sky who's, untouchable. And so I think that's a mistake some of the best athletes in the game today are making. They want to control their image. And by the way, you never, ever can. Because as long as there are journalists out there, they're going to have their own take on it. And guess what? They're going to present their take with or without you. So, one of the things I used to do with players was I'd say, hey, here's what I'm writing tomorrow. It's not good for you. Talk me out of it.
Really?
No, really. Yeah. And sometimes they would. Yeah. Sometimes they would. Sometimes they say, no, you have it wrong. This is what happened. That's not. And sometimes Dennis Johnson, God rest his soul, who I loved, those who don't know are too young. He was on the great 80s Celtics teams, an amazing clutch player. I loved him personally, but he was persnickety and he got cranky as the Celtics brought in younger players like Bryant who were taking away some of his minutes, rightfully so. Although I still want DJ in the game, when the game's on the line. But he had a hard time with that, as so many aging veterans do. And I said, DJ, man, I'm going to write that you haven't really been, on the one hand, you're a mentor to these guys. On the other hand, you're causing problems. And he's like, well, that's not true. And we talked it all through, and, we got done, and I said, you didn't really talk me out of this, And so I wrote, it wasn't a big story. It was just a little off day thing. It wasn't a big explosive story, but he was mad at me. He didn't talk to me for a little while,
Yeah. Howard
I understand respect. Yeah. I always said, you have to, if you're going to write stuff about these guys, you better show up the next day and take whatever it is you have coming to you.
Yeah.
Part of the deal.
Yeah. Howard Beck told me the same thing with Kobe, that he got shut out for a while, and then, but
Kobe was interesting.
You got to do your job. And I think at the end of the day, he, more than most people, actually respected that. Right.
Yeah. Kobe was complicated because he was so smart.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I got an email from him once in the middle of the night. We all got it. Well, not all of us, as it turned out, but a few of us got one. And it said, have you ever written any fantasy stories? And I mean, in my case, I had not. Yeah. I had all on my, no, I hadn't written any fiction. I was just doing my job. That's all I had time to do.
Right.
But I know he also emailed Bill Plaschke, for instance, my good friend from the LA Times.
Sure.
Yeah. And Bill had done some fiction. Yeah. So Bill answered him and said, I have. And well, then that started a dialogue. And of course, Kobe was starting his children's books and what have you.
Yeah.
But, Kobe and I had, we had quite a dance all the way through. One of my favorite stories of all time that I wrote was on Kobe Bryant when he retired, and his relationship with Michael Jackson. Is very, very complicated with a relationship with him, and how they both were pariahs at almost the exact same time, and how they both agreed that we just cannot talk to each other anymore because it's going to be bad for both of us. So there was some introspection I felt from Kobe, near the end. I really, I used to tease him and say, you're playing us all, man. We always think we're the only one, and there's lots of us, because that was true with Kobe.
Yeah, he was so good at it. Yeah, for sure.
He really was. And I really loved him. I did. I thought he was a lot, but I mean, talk about warts. Yeah. He had some that to his dying days, he wasn't really willing to confront.
Yeah, you wrote a great piece about Michael Jordan's relationship with him, which of course came full circle. I mean, we're recording this today on 2/24, which is the anniversary of his memorial, and I think we were all like, I was taken by surprise by Michael's speech. Quite frankly, wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was so from the heart, and I knew that, because I have photos of the young Kobe picking Michael Jordan's brain during an all-star game or whatever it is, but I didn't know it was that deep, right? Did that surprise you, the depth of their relationship?
Well, it did and it didn't. Kobe gave hints of that in that piece I just referenced, calling all these people. I mean, that's what the story was about, was Michael Jackson invited him to Neverland and showed him clips of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and was showing him all these things. And he said to Kobe, call everyone, someone that you think has greatness in them that you want to learn from, call them all. And he did. I mean, Kobe, Dr. J, of course, his dad had played with Dr. J, so that was an easy one. But Hakeem Olajuwon spent a couple of days with him, as you know. Called Larry Bird on the golf course, which Larry refuses to talk about to this day, because Larry is so protective of young players that solicit his advice. That's just how Larry is, which I love about him, actually. But all these people that he called, and of course, Michael was one of them. But he was calling Michael at 2, 3 in the morning. Like it's midnight in LA. It's Jordan's trying to sleep.
Relentless.
So, so it's funny because in a lot of ways, I think Kobe provided an entree to me with Michael. I covered Michael from start to finish. He was 25. I wasn't much older. We were pretty similar. We were both young, ambitious people starting out at around the same time. And I don't think I realized what a great connection I had to him till much, much later, till he retired. And now he's an owner. And I would go, I remember the first time I reached out to him, it was about Reggie Lewis, the great, late, great Celtics player, who I believe would have been a Hall of Famer had he lived. And there was one game that Reggie Lewis blocked Michael Jordan's shot 3 times. And I knew if I could get Michael to talk about it, it was on the anniversary of Reggie's death. I don't remember which anniversary, but I knew that Michael respected Reggie enough that it would be a speak on it. I knew he would, because I knew it would be a great memory for Reggie's family. And even though everyone thinks Michael's this heartless, cold guy, there's a lot of stuff in there that people don't realize. So anyway, he gave me a great interview on that. And that kind of started us on a path that's been really, really fun for me. I'm mentioning it again, the evolution of the NBA icon, but Michael Jordan gave us an hour, Andy, for that.
I know. I listened to it.
He was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I have a soft spot for Michael Jordan. I'm not going to lie.
No, I hear you. So where were you during the NBA bubble in 2020, that summer?
I was not in Orlando.
No, I didn't.
I was given the opportunity to go and had no interest. No, I was home. And so I was home, and they said to me, what are we going to, like, what can we do? Let's brainstorm. How can we, because, we were looking at creative ways to write about what was going on. So I got this idea to have, to watch the game with someone from the NBA. So I would interview them beforehand, and then I wouldn't like literally physically be in the room watching the game with them, but I would check in with them at halftime and say, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the game. So one of them we did was, I'm trying to remember. Oh, Trevor Ariza, because remember, Trevor Ariza was on a leave because of his child was ill, I believe, or something with his child. Yeah. So I did it with him, and he had his Laker jersey on, but he wasn't playing for the Lakers, and that was a really cool one. And I remember the most memorable one was I did with Lazary, the owner of the Bucks, and it was the night they got robbed on that call when they were playing. Remember that game?
Yeah,
and sure. So at the end of the game, he's like, this is, so I'm texting with the owner in the middle of this controversial game. So we got lucky on that one.
Yeah.
So that you're just trying to think outside the box a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
And
I was there 53 days, and it was it was interesting, Jackie. I gotta tell you, I did podcasts from my little hotel room, and it was such an experience. I don't know if I'd ever want to go through it again, but going back to what we talked about social media, the fact that all of that came to a head with the players out front and center, with the social justice issues with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all that.
I loved that about the players.
That's what I was going to ask you, your feeling on all of that.
Especially the Bucks, because I just thought what they did, it was so spontaneous, and it wasn't, well, we have to check with the commissioner. We got to check with Adam Silver. We got to check with our owners. No, those players got in there, and Sterling Brown in particular, and George Hill, they were very, very upset with what was happening. And Sterling Brown and George Hill are not household names, but they were like, I don't even, George Hill was saying, I think he said it publicly even before that, I don't even want to play. This doesn't feel right to me. We shouldn't be playing. And so Giannis, here's this young leader, not from America. He's from Greece, but his brother is in the Milwaukee, he's going to high school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Right.
And I just love the fact that he looked at these two people who were obviously ravaged over this. And he stood up and he said, I support them. We're not going to play. And then everybody's like, oh, Giannis. Okay, we're not playing. Yeah. So I thought it was a great moment for George Hill and Sterling Brown. They don't get enough credit for their stand. But it was also, to me, a very defining moment in the leadership of Giannis Antetokounmpo, because he just said, this isn't right. I'm with you. We're not going to play. Yeah. And I thought it was a very powerful moment. And I thought it was funny how some of the other veteran players are like annoyed. Giannis is supposed to check with them? Yeah. Right. Nonsense.
Yeah.
Absolute nonsense. I loved it.
Well, and then it just kind of started spiraling. They had that players only meeting, you remember, and
a couple of teams Jordan was involved in that too.
Hey, Jordan was there. Yeah, that was
Jordan was the go-between, because he was the only owner that had ever played in the NBA. Right. And so he was a great go-between between the owners and the players. And the one thing that Jordan told the owners, which was so important, was, for once, listen. Just listen.
Yeah. It was so surreal, Jackie. I was in the 7th day of my quarantine in my little hotel room, coming out the next day from when Milwaukee walked off the court, and everything shut down. So I'm thinking, well, they're going to let me out of quarantine tomorrow. When we go to the airport, go home? I mean, am I going to stay here? Am I going to be working? None of us knew anything. It was so bizarre. So could we go back in time and just go back? So you were a hooper, right? Growing up in high school, college.
It's funny. I was very late bloomer. I went to Westwood High School in Massachusetts. Great high school, great tradition of basketball stars, women's, girls stars.
Yeah.
And I went my freshman year. I had no idea. I had Argyle socks on. My mom was British. She didn't know anything about sport, American sport.
Yeah.
So I showed up to tryouts and I had these Argyle socks on, and I looked in the gym. I saw everybody in these short. I just was like, man, I can't do this. So I turned around and I left. And then my sophomore year, I had the tube socks my sophomore year, but I just didn't have enough courage to walk in there and try out. So I went home again. And then by my junior year, I was running track and playing field hockey. I was a good athlete. I was doing well in other sports. And the high school coach, Kathy Delaney Smith, I was in her office. I tried to be around her as much as possible. She was such a dynamic leader. And of course, she went on to be the Harvard coach for 42 years. She's the winningest coach in Ivy League history of all sports.
Wow.
That includes Pete Carrill.
No
okay.
Way. Yeah.
No, she's phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Wow.
Yeah, she's amazing. They called her the Wizardess of Westwood when we lived in Westwood. But anyway, she said, "Oh, I went to see your sister play today." My sister was a great basketball player. My sister Sue. She went on to play at Fairfield. She was on a full boat at Fairfield.
Yeah.
And she said, "At least I'll get one MacMullan to play for me." And so I said, "Well, maybe I'll try out." And she looked at me like just shocked.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, yeah, it's too late. I'm a junior. It's too late." And she's like, "Are you telling me you wanted to play all this?" I mean, I was 5'11". I'm walking around the halls. I'm 5'11", and I'm not playing,
Yeah.
So she became my mentor, and she's my great friend to this day. We're very, very close. We get together all the time. She's just retired also, so we're doing a lot of fun things together.
Yeah, she's in the Hall of Fame, right? She's in the Hall of Fame. Yeah.
No, not the Naismith Hall of Fame. She should be.
She's got to get in there.
We're working on it.
But
anyway, so once I started playing, I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
I mean, I played at University of New Hampshire, and then I played well into my 50s, which was a huge mistake because I now have 2 artificial discs in my neck. But
Well,
I just love basketball.
Yeah. Well, what I'm curious about it is if there was a WNBA back then, of course there wasn't, and the highest anyone could achieve would be the Olympic team. Nancy Lieberman tells a great story about that. But if there was, would you have aspired to that? Would you have seen that as like a goal instead of journalism, maybe?
No, I wasn't good enough. No.
Oh?
I always understood how good I was and how good I wasn't. I wasn't.
Always know your limitations.
That would have been a pipe. I mean, I had a nice college career. I'm very fortunate to have played, at that level, but I started so late. I never would have. I think the difference would have been if I was growing up and the WNBA existed, I would have been playing basketball in the 3rd grade, right?
Right.
When I was growing up, the earliest you could even play on a team was the 8th grade.
Yeah,
so that's the difference. My daughter started playing, I forget when. I think we made her wait a while because I just thought playing at 8 years old or something was kind of pointless.
Yeah.
So let's say she started playing in the 4th grade. And so she played all the way through. And that's a different, different climate than the one I was in. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to get up every morning, look out my window. Our road was on the flat part of our road. It was a horseshoe street. Mine was on the flat part. And we played street hockey every day. I was the only girl. And first to the pavement, got the first game. And I was the first one out there every single morning because otherwise I wasn't sure I'd get to play. So I was just, I loved sports. I just wanted, it didn't matter but then I fell in love with basketball and I can't shake that. I still watch all the games. I'm retired. I still.
Yeah, it's still in the blood, right?
Yeah, you follow closely and. But I just don't. I can turn off the set. I can first of all drink a glass of Chardonnay, and second of all turn off the set when the game is over.
And you don't have to worry about a quote or a scoop or anything, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you end up at the Globe in '82. Is that correct?
It is.
So what? Because I couldn't piece together how did you end up at the Globe? How did that?
I'm so lucky, right? Because that's so I went to the University of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And I was playing basketball. So those. Basketball covered both semesters. So most kids who were in journalism were doing internships during the school year, but I couldn't do that because I was playing basketball. So I was behind on my internships. So back then UNH had a great relationship with a gentleman named Jack Driscoll. And so every year, one student from UNH got to have an internship at the Globe that summer. And that was a huge deal. It was a national internship program. It was a big, big deal. So the summer that I was graduating from UNH, I got that spot, but the Globe did not allow graduates to have that spot because they didn't want you bugging them for a job. So my professor, Andy Merton, said, no problem, we're going to defer your graduation. So I literally I had all the credits, but I just deferred it. And I went there for the summer, and I worked in the news department, not in the sports department. And I worked the 7 to 3 shift, the lobster shift, they used to call it. And after I got done, I just go over to the sports department because there was another young intern there who became my best friend, Ian Thompson. Ian Thompson, of course, ended up working at the Globe and for the National. And
the same Ian Thompson. Yeah.
He's my best friend in this business. My oldest best friend in this business to this day. And so, and he was so polished. He knew so much more than I did. He was, gosh, he's so talented. So we hung out together all summer. He had an apartment in Dorchester. I was living at home with my family because I was from the Boston area. And at the end of the summer, I would, like I said, I would hang around the sports department. And I actually I actually went to Vince Doria, the sports editor at the time, who then went on to have a great career at ESPN, and said, I have a story idea. My old high school coach is going to Harvard. She's one of the winningest coaches. And he's looking at me like, and I said, I just thought maybe I could try it and see if you want, He's looking at me. She's like, all right, whatever. So I wrote it, and Ian helped me. Ian was so great. Ian helped me with the story. Ian was so, I really love Ian. He was a great support to me. Anyway, they ran the story like in the inside page. It was, they didn't give it any play or whatever, but at least I had Vince's attention. So at the end of the summer, I went to him and I said, look, I love sports. I would do anything to work here. I'm young, I'm cheap, I'm a woman. Anything you have, I will do anything. I'll do anything. So he said, well, we don't have an opening right this minute. We might have an opening because Ray Fitzgerald had just passed away. So he used me as a stringer to cover college football games. So I was covering Northeastern football, which doesn't exist anymore, and BU football, which doesn't exist anymore. And I was writing these stories. And what he really was doing was asking the desk, what time did she get it in? Was she good on deadline? That kind of thing. And then he called me up and he said, all right, come back in. And I went back in. He said, all right, come back and see me in a month. And I said, okay. And I said, I'm going to Orlando. I have an interview with the Orlando Sentinel. And I went down there and they offered me a job. So I went right from the airport to his office and said, so the Orlando Sentinels offered me a job. And he said, okay. He goes, well, come back in a week. So I went back in a week and he said, I guess I'm going to hire you. I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing. And were you the first woman, staffer in the sports?
No. Remember, Leslie Visser had been there for many
of course,
years.
Yeah.
And there was a woman named Judy Van Handel who worked the desk, who also did some writing from time. I was not the first. What I was the first female sports columnist ever.
Right.
And now I've been succeeded by Tara Sullivan, who does an excellent job for the Globe now.
Yeah. What amazes me about that story is this is the same young woman who didn't have the guts to try out for a high school basketball team, but you had the guts to go in and pretty much strong from the boss.
Only because Ian made me. I'm telling you, Ian.
That's beautiful. That's great. So when young female sports writers come, and I ran into Malika Andrews last night at the game, told her I was going to be interviewing you, and I just watched a clip of her when she interviewed you, and thank you for being the trailblazer, for leading the way. And I know, that you take that in stride, but you have set, so many women on a path to succeed because of what you've done. You still have young aspiring female sports writers, sportscasters come to you for advice and mentorship?
Not quite so much now, but I think it's important to say, Andy, there were lots of women before me.
I know you're how humble you're going to be, but everybody points to you.
And like I look at my contemporaries when I was starting out, and they're big names. We're talking Christine Brennan, and John Howard, and Sally Jenkins. Like, those guys are giants in the industry. And I think because I'm on television so much, I think TV is such a powerful medium, but I don't think it should diminish some of the great people that aren't on television regularly. And I just named 3 of them that I happen to admire greatly. But
and I love
I love young women, I love, like, when I was at ESPN, it was my favorite thing. And not just women, by the way. I hear more from men. You know why? Because women aren't like men in that they don't reach out the way men do. Men are like, screw it, I'm going to call her, or I'm going to text her, and women aren't as good at that. And so whenever I talk to young women, I'm like, don't be bashful. I made that mistake. You make that mistake. And so I just, when I was at ESPN, I mean, Ramona Shelburne, I consider my contemporary, even though I am quite a bit older than Ramona, but she was she's such a great reporter. And, we used to talk a lot about things. And, and Malika, gosh, she doesn't need my help. She's going straight, as I said on that show, straight to the moon. But, Emily Kaplan was someone that I really admired. She was a hockey writer, and I used to read her. And I was saying to the guys on Around the Horn, like, you've got to get her on the show. I bet she'll be great. And of course, now she's like this great network star covering the NHL because she's fantastic. Monica McNutt, what an amazing person she is. I mean, I saw her play for Georgetown. And then, she joined ESPN. And I mean, I talked to her for 10 minutes. I'm like, well, she's a star. You can just, some of these people, you can just tell. And
but don't you, but really, seriously, Jack, if you sit back, you kind of set the bar and you really showed what could be done. And I'm seeing young women, Melissa Rowland, people like who have really, you've helped pave the way for them, which is wonderful. Helene Elliott is a good friend of mine, and she's still working. I still see her on the hockey beat. It's like,
it's amazing to
me, right?
Yeah, Helene Elliott, she's a rock star. And Melissa Isaacson from Chicago. I mean, we can, we're going to forget someone, so I don't want to start rattling off names. But there's a lot of, and I think the television industry, I always say everybody should be tipping their cap to Doris Burke. Because Doris is a good friend of mine. And sometimes once in a great while, we get mistaken for each other. Although I don't think we look at all alike, but that's all right. I wish I looked like Doris. She's awesome. But anyway, I think she had the same effect, because she's so kind and so welcoming to people and willing to help. And that's the one barrier that I think, in talking with Christine and John and people like that, we always wanted to break that barrier down. This idea that we're all catty females trying to scratch each other's eyes out. That's not true. It's not true. I've worked with, it's a joy to have a female person, in my own market in Boston. Karen Garigian is one of the greatest journalists, unknown journalists, I'm going to say, of all time.
Wow.
Ask the New England Patriots about Karen Garigian. She's broken more stories than anybody for the Boston Herald. In fact, she was so good. The ESPN tried to hire her a couple times, but she had a mom who was ill and she just felt like she couldn't move. And so she needed, she chose her family over her, the furthering of her profession. Having said that, she covered everything. She covered hockey. She wrote a great piece with Mariel Lemieux because she also had Hodgkin's disease like Mario did. She wrote an amazing, I could talk about Karen all day, and it makes me mad that people don't know her because they should. She's so incredible.
I'm glad you mentioned Doris Burke because, by the way, better than probably anybody that 2018 she and I were both honored with the Gowdy Award, which is amazing.
A great year for the Hall.
It was. Well, thank you. And being mistaken for Doris just reminds me because I reached out to our good friend Jack McCallum.
We had a lot of that going on.
Talk to him about you a little bit, and he said my favorite thing about Jackie is that she'd write this great story, and then people would think I wrote it because our names are so similar.
Well, it's funny.
I love that.
Andy, this just happened, and I'm not going to say who because I don't want to embarrass him, but Jack just wrote not that long ago, in the last 3 years, a really beautiful piece on someone that I don't want to embarrass them. And that person called me up and said, how can I ever thank you for this beautiful story? But my favorite MacMullan story,
I love it.
We were trying to, Mark Bartelstein, the great agent, still one of the best, top agents in the business. He had a client, I'm going to say, and I don't hold me to this because I might have this wrong because my memory's fuzzy, but I think it was Hot Rod Williams. There was some controversy going on and everybody was trying to get Mark Bartelstein to talk about it. Well, Jack and I were at the playoffs somewhere. We were both in the same hotel. So Jack McCallum, Jackie MacMullan, they connected Mark Bartelstein to the wrong room.
Oh my!
And he's like, hey, I'm looking for Jack McCallum. And I'm like, he said, this is Mark Bartelstein. I go, well, hey, Mark, you got the wrong room. Yeah. But this is Jackie MacMullan. While I got you.
Yeah. What do you got?
So that was one of my favorites. Talk about Hall of Famers. McCallum. He's the one that got me to go to Sports Illustrated, Andy.
I
He
didn't know that.
single-handedly said, "You got to go, man."
Really?
So that's,
Wow.
yeah, I spent 5 years there, and he's the one that talked me into it.
Wow. What a group. I mean, with you and Bob Ryan and Jack. And I mean, it was just, I mean, we could
Dupree, I was talking about
continue.
Dupree the other day, another guy people don't
Free.
remember. Yeah,
Oh,
he was
I remember David so well. I mean, you guys
really
were this
talented.
core group. It was amazing back in the
It was
day.
really fun.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, we could go on for a long time, but you've been so gracious with your time and retirement. I got to respect the retirement thing. So
Thank you.
but
I,
thank you for
I
taking me
will tell you,
down.
Andy, I don't do a lot of these things anymore, but I would never say no to you. So.
Oh, you're so sweet. And I really, really appreciate it. I really do. And thanks so much, Jackie, for being part of my path and my journey. And, it's always so great seeing, because, we were never really close friends, but we were always like in the same place at the same time and sharing those experiences with you and knowing we have this core group of friends, Brian and Terry and
Brian
all our
McIntyre. Yeah, I always
friends.
think of Brian McIntyre as our connection, right?
Yeah, for sure.
East
But
Coast, West Coast.
yeah, I'm wishing you and your family all the best, Jackie. Thanks so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks.
I'll see you soon. So it may have taken some coercing and pursuing, but our efforts finally paid off to get the great Jackie MacMullan on our podcast. Thank you, Jackie, for taking some time out of your retirement to walk down memory lane with me and share your thoughts on your legendary career. I miss seeing you along the NBA trail, but I'm so thankful for the many, many times we were there together covering NBA history. Many thanks to my terrific producer, Eugenia Chow, and our editors, Megan and Sean, as well as our social media manager, Michael. Remember, everyone, you can find us on the iHeart app and online, as well as Apple and Spotify and your favorite podcast platform. Keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter at Legends_of_Sport, our website, legendsofsport.net, and our YouTube and TikTok channels, Legends of Sport. My photography can be found on Instagram and Twitter at ADB Photo Inc. So thanks, everyone, for continuing to support the Legends of Sport podcast. We love doing it. We love bringing these stories to you. Remember to rate and review. And of course, as always, tell all your friends. We'll be back next week with another great guest and episode. Until then, stay safe and stay well.